The woman encountered something strange while cooking. The eggs she had just bought turned out to be hollow. She thought only this one was bad, so she picked up another egg and squeezed it hard, only to find it also crumbled into pieces. She didn't realize until she crushed every single egg one by one that the entire box was full of rotten eggs. But that wasn't the only bizarre incident. That afternoon, while she was focused on cleaning the glass, she was completely unaware that the wall behind her was moving closer. Within seconds, she was pinned and couldn't move. But just as she was about to be crushed flat, the wall miraculously returned to its original position. At first, she thought she must be overly tired lately, causing hallucinations, and didn't pay it much mind. When she prepared to continue cleaning the glass, she was shocked to find marks left from her recent squeezing imprinted on it. Only then did she realize what happened was real. As she questioned her reality, she suddenly recalled her first day moving in when all the neighbors gathered and enthusiastically threw her a welcome party. Everyone wore genuine smiles on their faces, except Margaret, who was acting strangely and muttering to herself.
Why are we here? We shouldn't be here.
Her words baffled everyone, and they all thought Margaret had lost her mind. This was because it was touted as the happiest community on Earth, painstakingly built over years by a man named Frank. Whenever new tenants moved in, he would generously gift them a large villa and a top-of-the-line luxury car. Not only that, the men also received jobs with million-dollar annual salaries. There were only two conditions to join this community. First, occupants must be couples or married, and second, they must never set foot in the northern desert or face any dangers at their own risk. Life in the community was fulfilling. Every day after breakfast, the wives would uniformly come to the door to see their husbands off to work. Here, women didn't work year-round. They only needed to spend some time each day keeping the house clean, then could freely enjoy luxurious leisure time for the rest of the day. Though the community wasn't large, it lacked for nothing, offering all kinds of entertainment facilities with complimentary drinks and snacks provided. Most crucially, luxury goods here were very affordable, allowing the women to shop without restraint. However, before sunset, all the women were required to attend Shelley's yoga class to maintain their perfect figures and please their husbands after work. Yet Margaret was an outlier among them. A month prior, she had violated the rules by taking her son into the northern desert without permission. When security found her, her son was already missing, leaving behind only his favorite toy. After that day, Margaret seemed like a different person. She told everyone the whole community was fake and warned them to leave quickly. No one took her words seriously, instead gossiping about her behind her back, believing her grief over losing her son had driven her mad. But the recent strange events made Alice feel that perhaps things weren't so simple. Until that afternoon, while gathering laundry, she unexpectedly saw her neighbor Margaret holding her son's toy and staring into the distant desert. This intensified her curiosity, so she decided to go north alone to investigate, keeping it secret from her husband. Strangely, long before reaching the end, all the other passengers got off the bus, leaving only her and the driver. As they got closer to the edge of the desert, a loud rumbling suddenly sounded from the sky. She immediately looked up and saw a plane trailing thick smoke, its appearance identical to the model in Margaret's hand. Soon after, the plane plummeted directly behind the mountains. Terrified by this sight, Alice screamed for the driver to stop, urging him to drive over to help rescue people. To her surprise, the driver, filled with terror, declared that area off-limits and refused absolutely to drive there, advising Alice not to get involved. Seeing the driver wouldn't budge, Alice didn't want to waste time arguing. Rescuing people was urgent, so grabbing her bag, she jumped off the bus and ran frantically towards the crash site, failing to notice the warning sign nearby marking danger ahead. Yet strangely, though the plane had clearly crashed right there, she couldn't find even a trace of it now, and the landscape grew increasingly desolate the further she walked. Unconsciously, Alice arrived at the foot of a small hill. Atop it stood an out-of-place circular building, likely where the men came to work every day. She decided to go up and find help, but after struggling to climb to the top, she found nothing but a simple semicircular hut, completely deserted. Its bizarre shape looked nothing like a company, confusing her more about what the men did there daily. Seeing the glass in front looked like a door, she slowly placed her hand on it, trying to push it open. The next instant, a red light flashed, and she instantly lost consciousness, collapsing to the ground. When she awoke, it was already dark, and she couldn't remember how she got back home. Just then, noises came from outside. She saw her husband, Jack, frantically preparing dinner, but he avoided looking directly at Alice, seeming guilty and trying to hide something. So Alice interrupted her busy husband, asking how exactly she had gotten home. But Jack said she was already sound asleep in the room when he got home. Seeing her sleep so soundly, he hadn't woken her. Since her husband had no reason to lie, Alice told him everything about her day. Jack reassured her it was just a nightmare. The next day, while Alice was doing housework as usual, the phone at home suddenly rang. It was Margaret calling.
We can't stay here anymore, Alice. They're lying to all of us.
Although Alice vaguely sensed something was wrong, she had no proof. She thought this matter would slowly be forgotten. Yet during that afternoon's yoga class, an incredible scene happened again. She discovered in horror that her reflection in the mirror had actually transformed into Margaret's appearance. Not only that, the reflection had its own consciousness, and the next second it began frantically banging its head against the glass as if trying to escape from the mirror. Alice stepped back fearfully. She cried out in shock, and turning around, she found everyone looking at her with strange expressions. By this time, Margaret had vanished, and the mirror wasn't broken either. Alice was going crazy being tormented by these hallucinations. She immediately rushed to Margaret's house before the class ended, wanting to get some answers. But as soon as she arrived, she was stunned. Margaret was standing motionless on the roof holding a dagger, slowly turning her head only when she heard someone calling her. Then, without warning, Margaret cut her own throat with the dagger.
No!
Alice wanted to run over to help, but two security guards in red uniforms suddenly appeared and forcibly dragged her away. That night, Alice fearfully confided in her husband, but he remained calm, saying Margaret had just fallen from a height by accident, needed a few stitches at the hospital, and was fine now. But this time she trusted no one, because she had seen Margaret die before her very eyes. She also questioned her husband about what he did every day going so far away, noticing that all the women in the community seemed just as clueless about that mysterious company as she was. Jack stated it was company confidentiality, and he couldn't disclose anything. He quickly grew impatient with Alice's persistent questioning. He was about to get a promotion, a raise, and reach the peak of his life. He worried his wife's wild talk would cost him his job. They had always been very loving, but this was their first intense argument. Coincidentally, that night Alice had a nightmare. She dreamed she was falling into a bottomless sea, finally jolting awake when she felt she couldn't breathe. This dream also gave her an idea. The next day, after seeing her husband off as usual and sealing food with cling film as usual, suddenly she wrapped her own head tightly layer upon layer with the cling film, stopping only when she struggled to breathe. This near-death experience terrified her. Driven by an instinct for survival, she frantically tried to tear the film off. But like struggling to find the end of a roll of tape, she couldn't rip open the thick plastic. Just as she was about to suffocate, she finally managed to claw an opening with her fingernails. This intensely real feeling of suffocation convinced her everything happening these days was real. Jack also noticed his wife's recent odd behavior and invited Dr. Collins over on the weekend to give her a full checkup. Dr. Collins immediately threw out a bunch of academic jargon, racking his brains to convince Alice that everything she saw was imagined. But Alice had studied medicine before. She knew full well he was talking nonsense. While Dr. Collins was reaching into his bag for a pen, Alice accidentally glimpsed a medical file for Margaret inside, but it was labeled not as a patient but as a prisoner. While her husband and Dr. Collins talked by the door, Alice decisively opened Dr. Collins's briefcase and stole Margaret's medical file. However, she gained nothing, because all the key information on it had already been blacked out, making Alice even more convinced of her suspicions. Just a few days later, Jack successfully got his promotion. Frank held a special banquet to celebrate, and Alice arrived at the party beautifully dressed. Yet on this joyous day, Alice couldn't feel happy at all. She even hid in the bathroom because she couldn't stand the festive atmosphere. Bunny noticed Alice's abnormality and immediately came to ask what was wrong. Alice completely broke down. She told Bunny her suspicion that Margaret had been silenced because she discovered some dark secret within the community. To prove she was telling the truth, Alice even asked Bunny to accompany her back to the northern desert, but even Bunny didn't believe her, calling her crazy just like Margaret. Then, storming off angrily, Alice didn't know yet that Bunny was actually an informant planted near her by Frank. The next day after the men returned from work, Jack invited colleagues and neighbors over, but just as everyone was immersed in laughter and merriment, their boss Frank silently entered the kitchen. After chatting casually with the busy Alice for a few moments, he suddenly turned serious, bringing up the hallucinations Alice had been seeing and directly admitted her suspicions were all correct. So, Alice completely let loose. When dinner started, she directly took her husband's seat, sitting directly opposite Frank. Before they could even speak, Alice asked several questions to the couples present, and their answers were surprisingly identical. Everyone had moved from Philadelphia, and they all met their husbands on a train, foolishly thinking it was a beautiful coincidence. Only Alice found this terrifying upon closer thought. Pressing further, she learned that all the wives last went to the beach around March last year. Alice questioned the silent Frank. "Is your company even legitimate? Did you secretly alter everyone's original memories just to trap them forever in this seemingly perfect world?" But Frank was clearly prepared. Unfazed by Alice's accusations, he calmly explained that Alice, like Margaret, suffered from severe persecutory delusions and needed to seek treatment at a hospital soon. Everyone else had long been brainwashed by Frank. No matter what Alice said, no one was willing to believe her. The previously cheerful dinner party was ruined by Alice, ending on a sour note, and her husband was very upset. The promotion he'd worked years for had vanished overnight. However, Alice couldn't care less about her husband's promotion. Her mind was solely focused on escaping this terrible place. But she deeply loved her husband and wanted him to leave with her. Jack initially wanted to refuse, but seeing his wife so distraught, he softened and agreed. So they packed their things and got into the car, but Jack gripped the steering wheel for a long time without starting the engine, repeatedly apologizing. Immediately after, 2 security guards approached and forcibly pulled Alice out of the car. Only then did she understand. Her husband had betrayed her. Between his future prospects and his wife, Jack had still chosen the former. The security guards tied Alice up and took her to the hospital to erase her memory through surgery. But the moment the instruments electrocuted her, earlier memories flooded back like a tide. It turned out she was once an excellent surgeon with an enviable salary. But Jack was idle all day, holed up at home playing video games. Over time, Alice grew increasingly disgusted with him. However, Jack was a highly controlling person. After accidentally seeing an ad for Oasis Community online, he excitedly signed up immediately. This community was actually a one-to-one recreated virtual world. No matter how useless a man was in reality, as long as he paid the registration fee, he could transform into a successful person here. They drove luxury cars out daily, lived in mansions back home, and most crucially, their wives were gentle and devoted to them. Such a perfect life instantly attracted countless men who were failures in real life. While the men seemed to go to work every day, they actually went to the headquarters on the hilltop to log out of the system. Only then could they wake up in reality. Then, they would feed their sleeping wives some water and nutrient solution to prevent them from dying in the real world. After dark, they would log back into the system, pretending to be tired after a long day, and return home. The oblivious Alice still thought her husband was a good man. Although Alice regained her memory, it was only for this moment, because once the surgery ended, she would forget all of this again. Afterward, Alice, restored to factory settings, was sent back to continue living the life carefully designed by her husband, seeing her husband off daily, returning to her room to clean, enjoying the leisurely life of a wealthy woman, then sipping wine while waiting for her husband to come home from work. But this life didn't last long. One day, when Jack absent-mindedly hummed his favorite song from reality, Alice suddenly had a sense of déjà vu. The next second, dead memories attacked her. Past scenes flashed through her mind one by one. This terrifying truth was unacceptable. She never imagined her husband could do such a thing. But Jack showed no remorse whatsoever. He believed all this was for his wife's own good. Alice was utterly disappointed in her husband, yet Jack still wanted to salvage everything. Having no other choice, he simply knelt down. Though somewhat reluctant, Alice knew everything here was an illusion. How could she let herself sink deeper? Jack clung to his wife tightly, unwilling to let go. Alice used all her strength but couldn't break free, so she grabbed a wine glass and smashed it against her husband's head. But due to excessive force, she accidentally killed Jack. The noise also startled Bunny, who hurriedly helped Alice wrap the body in a bedsheet, then urged Alice to rush to the company on the hilltop to log out of the system, because once someone dies here, they also die in the real world. If a client died in his system, Frank would hunt her down relentlessly. It turned out Bunny knew everything. She was fed up with the torment of the real world, so she voluntarily chose to stay here. Meanwhile, Jack's death triggered the program's alarm. Frank immediately sent a large number of security guards to capture Alice. Under Bunny's repeated urging, Alice fled her home covered in blood. As Alice's memories returned, this virtual world also began to malfunction. The men knew something terrible was happening and started panicking. Alice got into Jack's car wanting to leave, but Jack's friend came to stop her. Luckily, Bunny arrived in time and pulled the man away. Just as Alice thought she could escape smoothly, the security guards immediately gave chase from behind. The men gnashed their teeth at Alice. Their good life had been completely ruined by her. She accelerated, speeding towards the northern desert, while the security guards chased her tighter and tighter. Seeing the company was not far ahead, 2 security cars pulled alongside her, trying to trap her from both sides. Worse still, Dr. Collins's car approached head-on, completely surrounding Alice in the middle. With nowhere to escape, Alice could only gamble. She slammed on the brakes, causing the 2 security cars to crash into each other unexpectedly and get violently rammed aside by Dr. Collins's oncoming car. The news of Dr. Collins's death soon reached Frank. He knew this community was utterly finished. But the moment he turned around, Shelley stabbed him with a dagger. After Alice's commotion, the women in the community gradually awakened. Alice also raced at full speed towards the hillside, but unfortunately, the car broke down halfway up and stopped. Time was running out, so she abandoned the car and ran desperately upwards. These security guards were very dedicated, climbing towards her like dense spiders. Seeing this, Alice dared not stop and kept running. Finally, she reached the system's exit one step ahead of the guards and escaped this virtual world forever.